Welcome back. David Wurmser is our guest. We're continuing a really important conversation about what is happening in the Middle East and what might be the upshot of some very misbegotten policy decisions by not only some in the region, but by our own government. And David, you were specifically talking about the Kingdom of Jordan. King Abdullah specifically seems to be making a mistake that has been made from time to time in the past. If indeed he does go the route of trying to appease the aspirations of the Palestinians for their own state, are they likely to wind up with his? And is he likely to wind up dead?
I think it's almost a certainty. I mean, the 1996 peace treaty with Israel, between Jordan and Israel, was based on the fear that Jordan had of the Israeli Palestinian Accords in Oslo and the possibility of a creation of a state, because that takes the Palestinian question and makes it a third radical factor between Jordan and Israel, and that threatens the kingdom profoundly. Uh, and as a result, Jordan has worked fairly carefully with Israel to keep that under control. But starting in 2016, well, really under the Obama administration, we very aggressively pushed the second state solution, undermining Jordan. It cannot survive because Jordan is ultimately based on the Hijazi tribes. It's a tribal structure, and it is ultimately threatened by the Palestinians that more or less make up the northern part of the country,
Hmm.
Jordan,
And a
uh,
large part of the population.
and a large part of the population.
Yeah.
So King Abdullah, by trying to appease them, he will lose the support of his tribes. He will lose the support of the foundation, the core pillar of the regime, which won't be there for him when he's finally challenged by the radicalism he himself has now fueled.
And
So that's
there's
why I
no
think
there's no
so.
support for him, I gather, among the Palestinians. So he's going to be
No.
toast. And just quickly, David, both Israel and Saudi Arabia would be very much impacted by the replacement of relatively friendly, relatively pro-Western, moderate, responsible ruler in Jordan with who? With a radical Palestinian? Would you expect?
Yeah, if there were some breakdown in order in Jordan, these tribes that the Jordanian kingdom was based on stretch all the way down to Mecca and Medina. It forms one of the core structures of the Saudi state, too. And any unrest in that area, especially spreading down to Mecca and Medina, profoundly shake the foundations of the Saudi kingdom
Wow.
as well. So they want Jordan to remain a stable Hashemite kingdom based on tribes. And they see increasingly the Palestinians as a threat to that.
Yes.
So the more
Another point of connection between the Saudis and the Israelis, and
correct,
we're on the wrong side of this. I'm
correct,
afraid at the
correct, we
moment under
are.
this administration. Speaking of on the wrong side, and also contributing to the difficulties that we're now facing in this region, David, of course, is the other major focus of your research and analysis, namely what's going on with the U.S. government's efforts to do whatever it takes, and I mean whatever it takes, to get a new deal from these mullahs. We talked earlier in the week about some Israeli reports that the U.S. government has actually realized that this is not going to work out, and they've decided to pull the plug on it. I ask you, is there any evidence that that's actually the case, or do you think the Biden administration is pursuing the same kind of misbegotten policy that it did many of these people, at least in the previous Obama administration, and compounding the problem of what we just discussed about their wrongheadedness on Palestinian issues.
There's no real evidence that the talks are collapsed, or that we're going to walk away from them, or Iran's going to walk away from them. Really, the opposite. Historically, when when the Obama administration dealt with Iran, and then the Biden administration, there would be these periodic waves of calming messages
Mm.
to the Israelis, which the Israelis always took seriously. Unfortunately, only to be surprised the day after when a deal actually was struck. I think we're in one of those cycles, and I think one of the key pieces of evidence that we are in one of those cycles is that the United States has returned to the key argument it makes for the agreement, which is Iran is weeks away from a bomb, and that therefore you have a binary choice. You let Iran get a bomb, or you go ahead with the agreement, even though it involves some awful concessions that ordinarily we wouldn't want to accept. So they may be telling the Israelis one thing and even signaling publicly the talks are in trouble, but the core message is the signaling that we have to move
Yeah.
to an agreement with Iran. Uh,
The
and
question that I have for you, David, is I know for a fact that we've been talking about being weeks away from Iran having a bomb, maybe 10 weeks away, for at least a year. And it seems to me that what we're being now told is that there's still some weeks away. At some point, you don't have any more weeks. You don't even have days. Are we at the point where a bomb in the hands of arguably the most dangerous regime on the planet, that doesn't yet have such capabilities at least, is imminent? I mean, like, no kidding, at hand. And something has to be done to stop it other than paying them the money to finish the job, which is what it seems this deal now basically comes down to.
Yeah, first of all, we've got a real problem because in the Ukraine war, our intelligence structures were used, and I'm for defending Ukraine, but it was inappropriate to put out low confidence or no confidence intelligence to make our point on Ukraine because that really undermined the American credibility, which, despite all the reputation from Iraq and so forth, really has a very good reputation in trying to tell the truth.
Mm.
So we have a problem here when they use these estimates. The second thing is, well, you don't necessarily have a binary choice between the agreement and an Iranian bomb. There are other options, and frankly,
Indeed.
options that are far more securing of no bomb in Iran.
Mm. Well, and not least of which is fraught, I think we have to acknowledge, but still, it is another option, which is that somebody, and it I presumably will fall to the Israelis to do, maybe with the help of the Saudis and maybe others, to take out these incipient nuclear capabilities of the Iranian mullahs. And I just would ask you, David, to the extent that a sticking point in these negotiations has been whether the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, the terrorist arm of the regime and essentially its most important security arm, is now removed from the terrorism list. Uh, is that, in fact, as you see it, the sticking point? And do you think that is actually going to prove to be an insuperable problem for this administration?
No, I don't think it'll be an insuperable problem because, first of all, we've already conceded the general point. In public, we say we don't believe the IRGC is a terrorist organization. We just believe elements of it, parts of it, the Al Quds Force are. So we're already splitting hairs to try to concede to Iran.
I'm fond of saying that there are good terrorists and there are bad terrorists, is kind of how
Exactly.
this is going to be
Exactly.
cast, I
But in the
suspect.
end, the argument that Iran is weeks away from a bomb will overpower this. And they'll say, listen, we don't want to remove them from the terrorism list, but we really don't have a choice because we got to stop Iran from getting the bomb.
Right.
The only way we're going to do it is concede to them on everything else. So,
And just quickly, and we've got 30 seconds, is there any prospect that we will actually stop them from getting the bomb, even if we do make all of these concessions, David Wurmser?
no, a serial killer can't be trusted on promises. Iran is as like a serial killer.
It
It is
is.
the essence of who they are. So any promise from them is meaningless. So we've
Yeah.
seen that again and again. So no, you can't. It's a
I
Israel
would
may say
only quibble about one point. I think it's not that they are like a serial killer. The mullahs
they
are
are.
serial killers, and they use the RGC for this purpose.
Yeah.
David Wurmser, we have to leave it at that. Thanks for this update. We'll look forward to more with you shortly. Next up, we're going to talk with Bill Marshall of Judicial Watch about some terrific investigative work that they're doing on the Bidens and more right after this.